Witam Państwa serdecznie. Proszę Państwa, właściwie to już zrobiliśmy taką przygrywkę w dniu wczorajszym do tej konferencji, Międzynarodowa Konferencja Naukowa, Młodzież 2025, aspiracje, wartości i scenariusze na przyszłość. Ci z Państwa, którzy z nami nie byli, nie mieli okazji też być w Centrum Dialogu Przełomy i posłuchać premierowych wyników, które związane są z naszym projektem badawczym pod tym samym tytułem i które to badania były realizowane na Pomorzu Zachodnim. Ale była to taka pierwsza dawka tematyki, którą chcemy się zająć na podstawie tematów, które zostały zgłoszone. Proszę Państwa, jak Państwo widzicie, Młodzież 2025 na naszym logotypie ma również podkreślenie kolorystyczne. To nie jest przypadek, to nie jest jakiś dodatkowy element, który po prostu jest ozdobny, ale który też trochę streszcza nasze podejście do tego, jaka jest dzisiaj młodzież. Młodzież jest różnobarwna, wielokolorowa, wybiera różne drogi i myślę, w tym zróżnicowaniu nie daje się wcale włożyć w jakąś szufladę, którą moglibyśmy podpisać choćby hasłem pokolenie płatków śniegu, pokolenie Z bądź coś takiego. To na pewno pomaga, ale nie zawsze pozwala zdefiniować wprost to, co się tak naprawdę dzieje z młodzieżą. Zaprosiliśmy na tę konferencję nie tylko osoby, które zajmują się sprawami młodzieży naukowo. Zaprosiliśmy także osoby, które zajmują się takimi sprawami praktycznie. Bardzo się cieszę też z udziału tych wszystkich osób, które choćby czy reprezentują Biuro Rzecznika Praw Dziecka, czy Ministerstwo Rodziny, Pracy i Polityki Społecznej. Oprócz tego zaprosiliśmy również gości zagranicznych. Bardzo się cieszę też z ich obecności. Jest z nami dzisiaj profesor Airi Aline Alaste z Uniwersytetu w Tallinie, profesor Howard Williamson z Uniwersytetu w Walii. Jest to o tyle istotne, że ci ludzie tak naprawdę jeszcze 25 lat temu dali impuls do rozwoju czegoś, co nazywamy dzisiaj politykami młodzieżowymi. Są najlepsi tak naprawdę, jeśli chodzi o ten temat i cieszymy się, że są tutaj z nami. Proszę Państwa, wczoraj moderował sesję dyrektor Instytutu Socjologii, profesor Maciej Kowalewski. Instytut Socjologii jest jednym z organizatorów tego właśnie przedsięwzięcia. Drugim organizatorem tego instytutu, tego przedsięwzięcia jest Instytut Nauk Teologicznych Uniwersytetu Szczecińskiego. Wczoraj był obecny ksiądz dyrektor tego instytutu, niestety nie mógł być dzisiaj z nami, ale jest z nami zastępca dyrektora Instytutu Nauk Teologicznych do Spraw Naukowych, pan doktor habilitowany Piotr Goniszewski, którego poproszę teraz o głos.
Chciałem serdecznie w imieniu naszego dyrektora przywitać wszystkich Państwa. Cieszymy się, że możemy partycypować w organizacji tak ważnego wydarzenia, tak ważnej konferencji, też za to, że możemy realizować ten projekt i nie zabierając dużo czasu, bo widzę, że jesteśmy chwilkę spóźnieni i żeby już przejść także do meritum i do tych jakże ciekawych wykładów, pewnie może ktoś się zapytywać, zastanawiać, dlaczego właśnie Instytut Nauk Teologicznych podejmuje też taką problematykę, ale wydaje mi się, że jest to bardzo ważny znak też tego, w jakim kierunku zmierza współczesna teologia także w Polsce, dlatego że my jako teolodzy, jako ci, którzy także zajmują się nie tylko kwestiami takimi czysto religijnymi, dla nas bardzo istotne jest uprawianie takiej teologii, która dzisiaj jest teologią oddolną, czyli tym naszym źródłem refleksji teologicznej nie są tylko te klasyczne źródła, którym jest Pismo Święte czy tradycja, ale także bardzo ważnym impulsem współczesnej teologii jest wychodzenie od dołu, czyli od tego, jaki świat jest i dokonywanie właśnie refleksji w tej perspektywie. Dlatego cieszymy się, że mamy właśnie też takie spojrzenie, które sięga do nauk społecznych i właśnie korzystając z nauk społecznych możemy mieć bardzo konkretny punkt odniesienia właśnie dla naszych refleksji, więc na pierwszy rzut oka może się wydawać, że Instytut Nauk Teologicznych i taka problematyka są jak najbardziej sobie obce, ale gdy przyjrzymy się temu bliżej, to zobaczymy, że jest to dla nas bardzo cenne źródło inspiracji i cieszymy się, że możemy właśnie w ramach Instytutu Nauk Teologicznych też tego typu badania prowadzić, które będą potem przedmiotem dalszych naszych prac na bardziej teologicznych płaszczyznach, więc dziękuję tu też księdzu doktorowi Remigiuszowi, że podjął się trudu organizacji konferencji. Chciałem też podziękować całemu zespołowi UNIWIZJI, która przygotowała tą transmisję. To jest naprawdę bardzo profesjonalna forma też upowszechniania tych naszych tutejszych obrad i cieszę się z Państwa obecności. Mam nadzieję, że w murach Uniwersytetu Szczecińskiego będziecie czuć się jak najlepiej i życzę wszystkim owocnych takich bardzo głębokich, wglądowych obrad. Dziękuję bardzo i życzę jeszcze raz wszystkiego dobrego. Witam na Uniwersytecie Szczecińskim.
Proszę Państwa, oprócz wymienionych przeze mnie gości dzisiaj, którzy będą na obradach plenarnych, są z nami także i będą jutro mieli prelekcje przedstawiciele 2 ośrodków z Londynu. Profesor Rafał Soborski z Richmond American University London oraz pani doktor Anna Jochymek z London Metropolitan University. I właśnie korzystając też z tego międzynarodowego wymiaru, chciałbym teraz przekazać moderację naszej sesji panu profesorowi Rafałowi Soborskiemu właśnie z Richmond American University. Bardzo się cieszę, że się pan podjął też prowadzenia tej sesji. No i oczywiście od tego momentu przechodzimy on English.
Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to this first session of the second day of the conference. It's a great pleasure to be here. And the session is titled Youth Digital Participation and Youth Policy in Europe. And it is of particular significance as it brings together the perspective of European youth policy and youth work with reflection on new forms of young people's digital political participation. And I think in this way we open the conference with this fundamental question of how Europe thinks about young people and also how it supports their development and how young people today find their place in the public sphere. We have with us 2 distinguished speakers, Professor Airi Alina Alasti and Professor Howard Williamson. I'll introduce Professor Williamson right before his talk, but now let me briefly introduce Professor Alasti. She is Professor of Cultural Diversity at Tallinn University in Estonia. Her research focuses on youth studies, lifestyle studies, cultural diversity, civic engagement and participation. She has published widely on young people, youth cultures, social participation and changing meanings of civic and political engagement in contemporary societies. Her work has paid particular attention to how young people participate in public life, including through social media and digital forms of engagement. Professor Alasti has coordinated and contributed to several international projects on youth cultures, lifestyle and participation. She has also been active in international sociological networks, including the Research Committee on Sociology of Youth of the International Sociological Association. Her research is especially valuable for understanding youth participation in societies undergoing societal and political transformation, including Estonia, of course, and other European contexts. Today, Professor Alasti will speak about young people's digital political participation, a topic that connects youth studies, civic engagement, social media, and also the broader question of how young people find their voice in contemporary public life. So, Professor Alasti, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. And now I make my presentation. Okay. So, the title, finally I put it that way, digital political participation of young people between opportunities and risk, as I emphasize it several times in my presentation. And maybe I start from a little bit more far, that there has been like a lot of discussion on... Can you use the mic? Okay, that's what I was kind of suspecting. Okay, I try to survive. Well, my starting point is that there has been like a lot of discussion of like falling voting rates and young people being politically passive, and there is a lot of apathy. And well, yesterday also it was little bit discussed the topic. Remi was stressing that the reason behind it has been the trust towards his institutions, and I completely agree with this point. But my starting point here is actually to stress that even so conventional political participation is going down, it's kind of have been replaced by new, more individualized forms of political sensibility. So my point here is that young people are not passive. They are just active in completely different ways, and these new ways are maybe not so well reflected through, let's say, quantitative studies by especially in political science. Even so, of course, nowadays there are a lot of research also explaining these new forms of participation, and also digital participation. So it's there has been several decades the different social scientists discussing about that. And in my first in the beginning of my speech, I'm mostly referring to the previous studies. And yeah, as also Australian colleagues have been stated in their widely quoted articles, young people in globalized world don't see so much relevance of state-based political participation and often perceive themselves citizens in global digital world. And Swedish social scientists have pointed out that now many young people can be described as standby citizens or reserved citizens. That means that even though they are maybe not like permanently active or being activist or something like that, they are actually willing to contribute. So basically they are standing to be ready to do something if somebody is inviting them, or they consider something very important, or they feel that what they are doing is important and can make also the difference, or maybe that it is good for their personal development. And I also would like to stress that maybe nowadays these kind of distinctions of politically active and passive use is a bit outdated, because well, there is relatively a small number of young people who are active, and they tend to be in many countries. If they are active in many ways. They are active in let's say, informal participation. They are also active in let's say, international organizations and also like international social movements, etc. But many of the things what this kind of activists do, it's somehow related to these standby citizens. I mean that they are the ones who are maybe not initiating things themselves, but they are supporting, like something when some kind of meetings or protests or something are organized. They are the one who will be there present, and that's why it is more important. And also in digital context, they are the ones who are kind of sharing the topics or commenting, etc. So even so, yeah, well, I'm already stressing third side that I want to say that the majority of young people are not passive, even though there is, of course, but well, this is another topic. I don't go to that. So it is, but yeah, well, these last two quotes are referring to these topics that these kind of, even though there has been some studies about all these kind of new forms of political participation, it is still that they are not highlighted enough, and let's say lifestyle, DIA, do it yourself, and activist forms of citizenship or remain like a little bit underexplored. Otherwise I don't see it. Okay. And yeah, referring to British colleagues' ideas, there has been witnessed some kind of changing citizenship already a while ago. This is, as you can see, it's from 2008. And basically their main claim is that the way of being citizen is kind of gradually changing. So when we are discussing about the traditional way and maybe nowadays older generations ways of being citizens, they call it dutiful citizens. So mainly the participation was in government-centered activities and people to somehow to show their interest or to participate in society. They did it through the organizations and often top-down organizations what were organized by state. And of course, following the media was more or less only and most important a source of information. And nowadays, actualizing citizens, according to their terms, are prefer to address issues that reflect their personal values, while maybe doing some kind of community work or expressing themselves in social media. And they are not so much in organizations, but rather these kind of loose networks when they are doing something together. And they are also described as mistrusting both politicians and official media and the main source of information and also maybe mobilization is social media. And well, I also thought that I little bit explained this theoretical models of digital citizens that the earliest definition emphasized that digital citizens is someone who is using the internet effectively. A couple of decades ago, the emphasis was on the idea that in the same way as the spread of literacy contributed to the rise and development of democracy, now this kind of real-time government information access and services enables people to feel like full members of society. And but this is just this oldest explanation of this term. I think that most widely nowadays, if we are talking about digital citizenship, we are discussing about norms and behavior concerning technology use and especially how it is used in education. Thirdly, some authors empathize the importance of how public authorities and state institutions use online opportunities to encourage and the formation of citizens and to increase political participation. So basically, what can be done, like by governments or how to contribute to the better participation of the habitants. And well, the third topic is about digital citizenship as political participation via social media. It's concerning this kind of self-initiated online participation. Well, what I have been mostly investigating and what is also discussing here today in my presentation. Well, one could say that digital technology enables this kind of new forms of organization that were not easy before. And above all, new opportunities have emerged for citizens to contribute in a way that are more personal and more flexible. So as I already said a little bit a couple of minutes ago, that people used to gather to the organizations to do something. And they were building up collective identity on the basis of their beliefs, what united them in these kind of organizations. But well, whether these were top-down organizations supported by state institutions or even grassroots groups initiated by citizens themselves, there were always, at some extent, like hierarchical communities. It's like organization is often hierarchical, well, which is not necessarily a bad thing. There are also a lot of good things about that. But this means that as an individual, you somehow talk for the organization, so you are remaining personally invisible unless you are the head of the organization. And with the help of social media, it is possible to contribute to the movements in a more personal way, while at the same time connecting oneself to the broader collective identity. And I wouldn't like to be too let's say theoretical. To explain it better, I'm using the example. And actually this is, I don't know if anybody remember the big social movement, Occupy movement, and that was actually also the same empirical data what was used by this authors of these tables, what I was just showing. And the Occupy movement, basically, it started September 2011 in New York. And it became rather widespread. I don't know if you remember, but they occupied this park first in America, but then they started to occupy the parks in many places in Europe, also in Australia, etc. And what was uniting them was this successful message via the 99%. So this referred to the unequal distribution of wealth between the richest 1% in the United States and the rest of the population. And this message spread like a wildfire in social media because a lot of people presented it as their own story. Well, in social media, mostly in Twitter at that time, as it it was a long time ago, many things still didn't exist, but also a little bit in others. But what it practically meant was that under the same hashtag, there were huge number of tweets, photos, mostly with of young people, somehow wearing the signs, I'm the 99%. So, and then together with their own experiences. Well, as this picture here is that I'm a student with a very large loan, or I'm unemployed with a small child, or the rent for my flat takes up a large part of my salary, and so on and so on. So basically, being part of this movement didn't mean so much. It didn't necessarily mean that you really have to somehow devote to it and follow the rules of the organizations or do something like that. You was just expressing your own story, and you became somehow bigger part of this movement. And every vote or every vote counts, or this saying, but here is that every tweet counted to make it bigger and more visible. Now I actually prepared to you nice TikTok videos which are not working. Anyway, that is a little bit unfortunate. I wonder if it is possible to put it somehow so that I wouldn't hear my voice. It's kind of very disturbing.
I don't want to.
Can you somehow put it away so that I wouldn't hear my own voice interrupting me all the time?
There's this echo basically, and I just don't want to put something that will switch the whole thing.
So it's it's coming from here. Maybe you can put turn it down.
Right.
Volume, good. Maybe that will help. But video wouldn't work. Okay, now it already actually turned to the next video, but as there are no videos, then it doesn't really it's not so important. But anyway, the first video, what you could see only the picture, and I had put together a nice sample of 8 different TikToks. But the idea was that in year 2021, 16-year-old Russian schoolgirl Alina Morozova posted a TikTok video in which she tore down a picture of President Vladimir Putin from the wall of the school. And well, I don't know how many people know about TikTok like trends and logic. So they work that way that with the same music, then people start to make similar kind of videos. So that was music was. Music clip was by the artist Face, and it was starting with meaningful words to criticize the authors. The authorities does not mean to criticize the motherland, and it was in Russian. And then there were like over 30,000 videos, young people from Russia doing different things. It's somebody was replacing the Putin's place with Putin's picture with Navalny picture, and a lot of that turned to somehow support Navalny. There was also kind of a video about this is a woman who kind of deserves respect about his wife. There were also actually some well, then there were also just pictures tearing to the small pieces Putin's photo or some people were kind of asking or inviting people to the protest. Some guy was, for example, saying that my DJ is also going to the protest. I will definitely go, and all these kind of things. So, but basically the logic is the same. That many people using this kind of online opportunities are able at least little bit show what they think of some kind of political issues or etc. Here, of course, the question remains that what is a big change, especially, of course, this case. We all know what happened on Navalny and 30 or more thousands of young people expressing their support didn't help it. But I would rather see here this kind of expressing yourself still as a little bit like a political act, because you are somehow showing what you are thinking, and you somehow also are able to like start to formulate what you are doing. There is actually also one video about Ukrainian girl in a shelter, but maybe I'm not going to discuss so lot about that, as you can't see the video and then it's getting a bit boring. But yeah, all in all, I think that, or I'm kind of believer that there are a lot of good opportunities in social media, and many young people are actually using it creatively. And also, actually, there are a lot of studies showing that this kind of simple behavior, such as posting, commenting, or tweeting on political issues, have a democratic value, since it has the potential of involve people. Sometimes online discussions can raise the likelihood of participating in politics offline. So if nothing more, social media can be a gateway for enhancing political participation. Social media has also strengthened and given opportunities to creative communities and networks. We can describe as participatory cultures and with civic imaginations. And 10 minutes. Okay, so it's. But are you sure? But I was told that I have 40 minutes.
Is it 40 minutes or 30 minutes? I think it's 30.
30. Oh, actually, I have prepared 40 minutes presentation. Then, of course,
4
Sorry?
4 minutes extra.
So I have 14 minutes.
So you have 14 minutes now.
Okay. Because my main part is empirical material in Estonia. I'm not even there. Okay, then I already told about opportunities, but of course there are also risks. There has been discussion that there is a secondary digital divide, which shortly to say means that there are also young people or many young people in social media but do not use it politics, and that might even increase inequality. Of course, social media is exposing a lot of misinformation that might be one of the biggest real threat at the moment, at least in my opinion. There has been also, we really have to consider how platform affordances shape how young people engage with political content, and there are dangers of amplifying every kind of things what we are not consider very good, and algorithmically shaped timelines can contribute to the echo chambers and political radicalization. That has been also one concern what has been discussed a lot. However, even so, I wouldn't say that it is non-existent. I think this threat is overrated. There are a lot of recent studies which are showing that mostly it wouldn't happen to young people. Even so, it would. I think there is some estimations that 5% of young people can really radicalize because of these reasons. But as majority of young people are using so many different sources, the getting to some bubble and becoming radicalized is not seen very big danger by many authors. Of course, there are authors who are seeing it differently. And as I said, I wanted to present you some cases of Estonia. Now I'm doing it a bit more quickly than I planned. And some of the things maybe to emphasize. Estonia is called the first digital nation and the European Silicon Valley. But on the other hand, we are post-Soviet country, and especially this kind of civic engagement is still characterized by our past, as many other countries in similar with similar history. On the other side, digital participation is higher than in many other countries, and even though there is low interest in institutional politics and traditional political participation, there are a lot of interest towards topics, let's say, to social justice among the young people. And regarding this, I was saying in the beginning that this is something what is common. It's not something specific to Estonia or post-Soviet countries. Like this declining interest to institutional politics is actually everywhere. But I still think that let's say this post-Soviet context, it's even more strong. And I use here different data also where there are contributed many people besides me, but shortly there are first group are young people who kind of defined themselves politically inactive, and there has been interviews and ethnography. Then there are new migrants people from different backgrounds who they are up to 29-year-old when they were interviewed, and then there is also study of Twitter, both in 2022 and then later 2024. Basically, that is when Musk has taken over the platform. So, social media use of the politically inactive or young people who consider themselves politically inactive. So even so, they were actually saying that they are not following politics neither anywhere else, but also not in social media. So for example, they don't follow this kind of political content or accounts where it is spread. It is somehow they were actually pretty well informed about any kind of different political issues about global news, social movements, US politics, local polarizing issues, migrants, etc. They somehow still reached to them through these non-political accounts and memes. So it could be said that the political content is difficult to avoid on social media, even for the youth who kind of say that they are not interested in politics. So it's and another thing. What is the second point of this slide, that political views, at least for this group, are not so much dependent on local party politics or maybe also on personal everyday experiences, but they are mostly influenced by these global social issues, and these ones are actually connected to this content which goes viral in social media. If there is something going viral, this is something everybody is following, and then they are making, they are taking opinion about that. In this study, this Black Lives Matters is quoted different in many quotes in these slides, because, well, if you remember 2021, there was this big famous event of the violence, which kind of escalated to the big like global issue, at least in social media, and everybody was following that. And young people actually discuss these issues in small, closed friendship groups, and often political topics come up where someone posts meme, link, or news story, or a screenshot from the comment section of the news or article. And sharing memes is a very, very common way to start or contribute to the political conversation in closed friendship groups. And besides sharing these memes and then, I don't know, laughing and discussing that, then they are also very active of creating memes. And they are not using public social media a lot because they are scared of the potential negative feedback. And some people really believe to the social media because they feel that if it is considered important, then so many people are kind of cheering and supporting it, that there are some influence. So all in all, I would think that regarding this group, what I find important is that even if they define themselves politically inactive, they are pretty well aware of the topics, and that is because of the social media. And this kind of expressions help them to take a stand and form their opinions, and on the other hand, these risks here could be said that are when they are avoiding expressing themselves already in social media, it also can reduce their willingness to voice their opinions in other contexts, and they are going more and more far from the local politics. So I'm running out of time. Very simply, I just say that in 2022, Twitter was considered like a very, very excellent place for political discussions, and because of different reasons. And well, it could be said that there were two ways of the two aims of sharing information for mobilizing and raising awareness, and here in 2022 a lot of the examples are of Ukrainian war and how they are thinking about that and what they are doing to do it. And from 2024 there has been the Twitter has completely changed. And there are, well, bots, blue check marks, and the rage baiting, what I'm not able to explain too much, but the experienced users were not too happy about that. And there is also kind of at least some possibilities that this kind of almost far-right content are promoted, and there are a lot of engagement farming, and one thing maybe what is important is that that was connected to this AI, if you see in the middle of the quotation, is that even these experienced and educated users, they started to well, they were well aware of the potential misinformation, but they were able, they thought that they were able to recognize it or deal with that before, and now they were doubting about that. So here, of course, this case was to illustrate how these affordances of the platform are influencing both the opportunities and risks. And here I would like to emphasize that let's say these interviewed people, they were not the ones who would be endangered, but if we would talk about the younger and less experienced user, they might be very vulnerable in this kind of environment where hatred speech and all this kind of and far right content and etc. have been distributed. So I had no opportunity to discuss you about the new migrants, just the main point for the conclusion. So, well, as I said, that there are a lot of positive things of these political expressions by my mind, and not by my mind. There are elaborated discussions about it by many authors. But of course, the thing is that there are also risks that should be managed, and also some kind of inefficiencies reduced. So a couple of just more practical questions I would arise in the end is that well, how we can actually do this maximizing opportunities and minimizing risk. And one of the things, of course, is that many young people are very skilled, digitally skilled, and well, I would think that somehow embracing their knowledge to the civic education would improve it and would make it also more interesting for young people. And obviously, civic education should include knowledge about these affordances and the algorithms, and also one of the key questions remains if and how it would be possible successfully implement platforms designs for the citizens and information and participation. There was a bit discussion about it in a third part what I missed, but this is possible, but it is actually very challenging because it has been tried a lot and there are many unsuccessful results of that. But well, sorry for being a bit late.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I'll ask the audience to keep the questions until after both presentations. So let me now introduce Professor Howard Williamson, Professor of European Youth Policy at the University of South Wales in the UK. He has previously worked at the universities of Oxford, Cardiff and Copenhagen, and has held visiting positions at universities and research institutes in Hong Kong, Malta, Croatia, China, France, Australia and Iran. For several decades, he has been one of the leading European scholars in the fields of youth studies, youth policy and youth work. His research interests focus particularly on youth policy, citizenship, social exclusion, and the role of youth work in the personal development and social integration of young people. Since the 1970s, Professor Williamson has conducted more than 70 research studies on young people. He has worked extensively with the Council of Europe, coordinating youth policy reviews in 21 countries and co-editing the 7-volume series History of Youth Work in Europe. A special place in his academic work is occupied by the long-term study, the Milltown Boys, about a group of young men whom he first studied 50 years ago and following their lives from adolescence into adulthood and later into their 60s. Among his most recent publications are the Milltown Boys at 60, About Time, Advanced Introduction to Youth Studies, Transitions on Hold and Taking Stock. Where Are We Now? Youth Work in Contemporary Europe. Professor Williamson, it's a pleasure to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Okay. No. Thank you very much. I've got a very, very painful knee, so when I get up, and if I scream, it's because I haven't got up properly. But I'm going to try and stand up because I need to move it. Right. About 2 weeks ago, this image was projected in the British media. This is the lorry that was sent out to repair a hole. Okay, it's a private company that was sent to repair a hole, but instead of repairing it, it tipped over into it. And you can see it says stabilized pavements. But it has proved difficult to get the lorry out of the hole. And I thought about coming here to Poland, and I thought maybe it's a bit of a metaphor for where youth work and youth policy is in Europe at the moment. There was a hole that needed to be filled with a debate about what we do for young people, what we do in terms of developing youth work. I have a skeptical view about whether in 2026 we are still making progress or whether we've stalled, got stuck and fallen into a hole. I think 10 years ago we had a lot of vision and a lot of possibility, and things have gone a bit, in English we say pear-shaped. So that I wanted you to see that because I think it's just a great photograph of how things can go wrong. So next, no, forget that. Get rid of that. No, this one. Now, my second problem is I never know what sort of room I'm going to be speaking in and what kind of screen is available. So that, on a very big screen, is very readable for you guys at the back. And on a smaller screen, it's impossible for you to read. So I'm going to try not to worry too much about that and try to talk you through what's on that mind map. And if there are any questions or comments, we deal with them in the discussion that Rafa's going to moderate. I did prepare. Remy was Remy contacted me in December 2025 to come here, and I've very rarely been in Poland, though last time I was in Poland was with Eva, with whom I've also shared the book publication of Transitions on Hold, which is how the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted young people's transitions to autonomy. Eva was the lead editor, and there were 4 of us as the co-editors altogether. And Eva and I also did a youth policy review for the Council of Europe in 2012 of Ukraine. And of course, shortly afterwards, the Russians invaded Crimea. We went to Simferopol as part of our study visit. And we wrote what we I've done 21 policy reviews, different European countries, and Ukraine is definitely one of the best reviews we ever did. Eva led the writing of that review. It was then translated into Ukrainian, and it was forgotten about until about 2016, 17, 18 maybe. And then suddenly, what did they call it, Eva? The Orange Book. Suddenly the Ministry of Youth and Sports in Kyiv discovered the Orange Book. And it was about activating young people. It was about broadening the framework of youth policy in Ukraine. Ukraine had the highest rate of HIV positive people in the whole of Europe. There were a whole set of questions about human rights, about non-formal education, and it remains quite an important publication for shaping youth policy in Ukraine, even in these tough times of war and conflict. And we are both, and I certainly am deeply involved with Ukraine still, with the politicians and Zelensky's private office and, and so on. The reason I started doing a mind map, Remy knows I've got a very, very detailed PowerPoint presentation for this conference, but I'm not going to use it. Initially, you wanted me to do that, and it's about the research agenda in Europe, which covers things like housing, mental health, social exclusion. And one of my slides in that PowerPoint, if I was to show it to you, is a conference I spoke at in 1994, which has exactly the same issues facing young people. And it was a big British conference called Teenagers at Risk in Britain Today. And I was the closing speaker on youth policy. And I don't hear very much that is very different in 2026 from what I heard in 1994. Today, and we were talking about this at breakfast, a former government politician, Minister Alan Milburn, has published an interim report on young people not in education, employment or training, who sadly most of you probably know of by the name of NEET. I hate the word, I won't say it. I think it's an insult to those young people. They are in that situation of being outside of education, employment or training, but to brand them with that label is appalling. But we now have 1 million of those 16 to 24-year-olds in British society. And the anticipation, and I know some of the conference is about anticipating the future, and I know in Poland you've got a big challenge around this group as well. The anticipation in that report, published this morning and broadcast strongly on the BBC this morning, is that if we don't do something very different in our education systems and in our labour market strategies for young people, we are likely to have 1.5 million young people, young adults, not in education, employment or training within the next 20 years. So, and that's my territory. And it's lovely to see Alina again. We've known each other for 25 years, since you were a PhD student in the Nordic PhD program, coordinated by Helena Helver in Finland. And I always love listening to Alina's stuff on citizenship and participation, but she knows that I immediately criticize this use of the 2 words in the same sentence. Because I've met too many young people who are active participants, they're participating strongly for the reasons you outline, but in some parts of the world they are stripped of citizenship for behaving in those ways. So sometimes citizenship and participation do not run together. The Occupy movement was, which you mentioned, and I took quite a lot of notes, was actually based on a document published in 1945 which established the United Nations Convention on Human Rights. A small document called Indignez-vous, which led to the term indignados in Spain, which was the Occupy movement in Spain. So some of these things have long traditions. And returning to the NEETs, listening to the radio this morning, I was crazy because I was writing about this group of young people in 1985. I wrote an article called Struggling Beyond Youth. And that was from my practical youth work experience. And just to give you a little flavour, where I say up here, I know you can't read it over in the back, so it says 1985, where I come in to the European scene. And I was a practicing youth worker at that point, running a youth club, a youth centre in Birmingham. And I started to meet young people who were leaving school at 16 and failing to find work and not staying in education and refusing to go on youth training programs, despite the government's commitment to those youth training programs as a guarantee. And you will know the European Youth Guarantee. I do point out around the world that guarantees, if they're crap guarantees that mean very little to young people, will produce NEETs, not solve the problem of NEETs. So I just want to plant that with you. Right. If you... Oh, God. What happened there? Well, horrible. If you could read that in the back, and I think you can read it a little bit here, you can see some of that. The right-hand side is basically the evolution of youth work in Europe over the last 40 years. And on the left-hand side is the evolution of youth policy. And one of my problems, not understanding Polish and having arrived late yesterday, not being able to benefit from hearing the findings of your research, is that I don't know who you are. And I don't know what your histories are. I know you work in the ministry, but I don't know the rest of you. And sometimes I tell people things that they are very, very familiar with, and sometimes people actually have a very narrow window of understanding about how things have evolved. So I'm going to try, in the next 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, to give you some of the key staging posts in the last 40 years and how these things evolved, because there is such a lot of bullshit. It is now peddled by the European Commission, particularly, and sometimes by the Council of Europe, though a little less, about where these things came from. There is a big tendency to rewrite history in the image of today's issues. And I get horrified at the factual bullshit and errors that senior officials in those institutions sometimes peddle to the rest of the world. And I have been a copious researcher, practitioner, and policymaker over that time. So I have very, very forensic records of how these things happened. Now, how many of you in this room know about, and I'll start on policy on the left for a moment, the 2001, 25 years ago, the 2001 EU White Paper on Youth. How many of you know anything about that? A couple of you. You can imagine Viviane Reding, the commissioner in 1999, Viviane said to young people, a group of young people, representative youth organisations, the sort of kids I don't recognise because I've never really worked with them, very vocal, very confident, very participative, brilliant young people, but very atypical in my view. But Viviane Redin said to those young people, tell us what you want. And what do young people say they want? Different forms of education. They say they want work. They want to live healthy lifestyles. I mean, no, nobody's going to write policy documents that say we want young people to be unhealthy, out of work and uneducated. The Irish used to have a youth strategy called Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures. And I remember saying to the minister, well, you're not going to call it Worse Outcomes, Darker Futures, are you? Britain had a conservative policy, youth policy, in 2010. Tim Loughton was the minister. It was called Positive for Youth. I said to Tim, well, you're not going to call it Negative for Youth, are you? We all know what we want. And young people in 1999 knew what they wanted. But there were lots of reasons why the European Commission couldn't touch those issues. Certainly not the youth, culture, education and sport bit that Viviane Redin was in charge of. Because employment was over there. And something else, it was subsidiarity. So slowly there had to be a management of expectations. And only a couple of you know what the white paper contained. It contained commitment to four things: participation, information, a better understanding of youth, and voluntary activities. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but they're not top on the agenda for most young people. The beautiful thing was it was a white paper. People think the white paper was the start of the European Union's commitment to youth policy. The book that I have not published yet traces youth policy evolution in Europe actually way back to 1973. When the Commission established a tiny little division of education and youth policy, which was largely about language learning across Europe and exchange programs. And that was what led to Erasmus in 1987. And in 1987, I was in Brussels and I was really pissed off with the debate, which was all about students. Because I was running a youth centre of kids who were never going to go to university. They were working class, unskilled, they were going to get labouring jobs, those kinds of things, factory jobs. And I said, and one of the senior people didn't remember me, but remembered the words, not all young people are students. In 1988, Youth for Europe was established, which is now Erasmus Plus, and has remained, evolved over time. So which is a great development in the European Commission. We should support it. Every young person should be part of that exchange program. The problem is, rather like Alina said in her talk, there's these kinds of young people with multiple commitments to participation. You said about this sort of small group who are doing everything. And in Wales, where I come from, there are young people who've been on 5 or 6 exchange programs. And most of the kids I work with and involved with football and stuff like that, they've never heard of Erasmus Plus. So, and the Commission are not very good at reaching out. Reach is a critical word in our Europe around policy and youth work. How do we reach the disengaged young people? You're going to be talking about radicalisation tomorrow. How do we reach those sorts of young people? Not the participative youth council people. They're actually easy to reach. And nobody's biting that bullet. I've spent my life going into dark corners of young people's lives, crime, drugs. And it's extremely hard, and it takes a lot of patience to build relationships and trust. And most people haven't got the time. In fact, just before I move on to another thing, I once gave a talk. The British government established something called the Children and Young People's Unit, and it was full of top-level politicians, and I was the only non-political speaker. And my final words in my 20-minute speech on that day in 2002 in London to 1,000 people was, politicians and funders have to learn the art of patience. It takes time. And everybody wants faster and faster turnarounds. So, we have the EU White Paper over here, 2001. And then slowly certain things start to develop, including just before the white paper, the establishment of the EU Council of Europe Youth Partnership. Don't put your hand up, Eva. How many other people have heard of the Youth Partnership? Anybody know about it? A touch. Okay. Established in 1998. I was part of the group who established it. So I'm the strand that's still, I think I'm the only one left who's still kind of involved. And the partnership was an attempt to harmonise some of the thinking about youth policy and youth work between the European Commission, now 27 countries, and the Council of Europe, now 46 countries. But actually, there's still very separate policy agendas taking place. Okay? We were also on the road to doing these country reviews. We never did Poland, but we did 21 countries, starting in Finland in 1997, where we looked at what those countries were doing for young people, and we talked to young people about what they thought their countries were doing for them. And sometimes the relationship was quite close, and sometimes it was far apart. But we covered countries like Malta and Armenia and Albania and Sweden and Norway and Spain, Estonia, which was the technological capital, as you rightly say. I remember talking to a guy called Yuri Sarnit, who was a professor of sociology in Tartu, I think, who said to me in 1996, our dream in Estonia is to put one computer in every school. One big computer in every school, because we want to be ahead of the curve on technology. And that was achieved. That was the starting point there. Now, the word youth work, and I don't know how it translates in Polish, doesn't translate into German or French very well, but Eva and I were talking about youth spaces in Krakow, where she lives. And there are many, many different forms of youth work, and we thought we ought to start exploring what people understand by youth work, because everybody was saying, we need more youth work. But everybody was not sharing what they meant by that. A lot of people think it is international exchange programs, not youth centres. Some think it's self-governed organisations, some think it's practice that's led by professionally trained youth workers, non-formal educators. So we started to write these 7 volumes of youth work in Europe in 2008. That's another bit of the bullshit that is often peddled, that people think that the history project came out of the European Youth Work Conventions. They did not. We'd done 3 history seminars before we had the first European Youth Work Convention in Ghent in 2010. And I'll talk to you just about 3 conventions, just to give you those stepping stones. There's been 4 conventions now. The last one was exactly a year ago in Malta. The first convention brought 500 people together to talk about, do we share an understanding of youth work? And yes, we shared an understanding that youth work was diverse. It took place in lots of places. It involved different sorts of people. In other words, diversity was the story about youth work. But remember, this was the time of the financial crisis, and politicians were looking at savings, and they saw youth work as chaotic. You know, you're telling us that any work with young people is called youth work. People were disagreeing with that internally, but it was sort of leaking out into the political arena, and politicians were deeply skeptical about what youth work was. So 5 years later, we discovered that Belgium once again had not the presidency of the EU, but the chairmanship of the Council of Europe. So we organised a second convention in Brussels to talk about what do youth work people share. Street-based work, centre-based work, issue-based work, project-based work, international work, local work, professionally led youth work, self-governed youth work, all those different forms of youth work. And we thought, or I certainly thought, that it would be a battleground of ideologies about what youth work was. But we came to the conclusion, and I thought this was the high moment in youth work evolution in Europe, because it came up with a very simple message that all youth work is about winning spaces for young people's autonomy and participation. So the word spaces, and building bridges to the next steps in their lives, the next positive steps in their lives, not necessarily to the labour market. So not just about employability, but contributing to helping young people to take those next steps in very, very difficult and challenging times, which have got tougher in recent years. And my book is all about the poly-crisis. I mean, some of you will know political scientists like Ivan Kraschev and Mark Leonard, who talk about the poly-crisis. I've written 10 things, two or three pages on each one. Education and employment, housing, climate, energy, social media, technology, artificial intelligence, identity, mobility. It's a whole set of things that are making the current generation of young people in Europe deeply anxious about their futures. Affordability, the planet, and all of those things. So this was the high spot, the second convention, which led to a recommendation on youth work in the Council of Europe. And I think that was the pivotal moment, 2015 to 2017. And 3 years later, we got the German presidency of the Commission, at the same time the chairmanship of the Council of Europe, to push forward a resolution on a European youth work agenda. And that's what we got in December 2020. And I think that and I have been a policy advisor on criminal justice, on formal education, on substance misuse, on lots of things, and I've seen action. There's a framework, and then let's make something happen. What sort of professional people do we need to deliver child protection or whatever it may be? Youth work is pathetically slow at doing any of these things. It would prefer another 5 years of discussion rather than 5 years of implementation. So that's my personal view. We had a fourth convention last year in Malta, 2025, because lots of people started to say these conventions have to happen every 5 years, because the first three had happened with 5-year intervals. That wasn't the reason. It was just chance. It was a political opportunism, that those are the moments where we could maneuver around the presidencies and the chairmanships. So Malta has just produced a roadmap for youth work going forward till the next convention in 2030. And each of those costs €1 million. It's time, how am I doing? 5 minutes. Okay, so I've really that's the youth work story. And around that, we've had all sorts of research projects, inquiries, documentation about a lot of these issues. We've got a good, solid body of knowledge at a European level on some of these questions and challenges. The question is what we do about it. And of course, what we do about it is what should be taking place over here around policy. Now, much as some of us have tried to harmonise EU policy for young people and Council of Europe policy for young people, it's never quite slotted together. 2008-9, Council of Europe had one set of ideas, European Union had another. That's quite a few years ago, so I won't bore you with the items within that. 2017, 18, 19, so not so long ago, less than 10 years ago, we've got the European Youth Strategy around engage. Well, I can't remember what they are now. What's the three things? Connect, empower. Engage, connect, empower. Lovely words. You know. And this is about mobility and youth work and so on. And the Commission has pressed forward on that and is currently preparing a new youth strategy for the next 7-year cycle. Council of Europe in 2020 has a youth sector strategy with 4 things: revitalizing pluralist democracy, access to rights, living together in peaceful and diverse societies, and youth work. So youth work is quite solidly on the map as an instrument for the delivery of policy. And if I was using my other PowerPoint, which I'm not, my final slide would have been 6 ideas for youth work as contributing to the wider youth policy agenda. Because one of the critical things is reach. I wrote an article once which was called "You Can't Play a Fender Stratocaster Forever." So youth work might start with music projects, but sooner or later it's got to move young people to the next step. We've got a conference here going on down the corridor about careers guidance. We need to make sure that young people are positioned so that they can actually move independently and autonomously, but not abandoned. So supported in that movement towards the labour market. And a lot of youth work is rather bad at holding on to its young people for too long. It needs to sort of kick them up the backside and get them moving. But youth work can be the conduit whereby you reach a lot of those young people who, and I will finish with this, who sadly remain almost completely untouched by any of this stuff. Now you might say, well, that's not surprising, it's all high-level Brussels, Strasbourg stuff. Well, it is in some ways, but it filters down. You joined the EU in 2004. The countries, the 10 accession states at that time, hung a lot of ideas on the EU White Paper of 2001. It was their sort of starting point to be within the European Union. Of course, I'm not in the European Union anymore because we left in 2016. But sadly, the relationship between the European level and all of that stuff that I've tried to give you a very short understanding of, and practical, on-the-ground policy and practice for the young people who need it. And a lot of young people in Europe do not need it because their parents will support it. The research tells us, the bank of mum and dad. But there's a lot of young people who are neglected, left behind, and I will leave you with this thought, because in a couple of weeks' time I'm speaking in Slovakia, and they want me to talk about how you activate young people, how you get them, make them more active. And I say most of the kids I work with, they want me to do things for them. They don't want to do something for themselves. And sometimes if you say, no, I want to activate you, there's a line in a book, it's a terrible book, but it's a brilliant line. It says, freedom to the adolescent can look suspiciously like neglect. And there's a lot of young people in our modern Europe who feel that they have been left behind, neglected, untouched by the kinds of policies and youth work practices that the European institutions are all too happy to tell everybody how brilliant they are. They will talk about youth work expanding throughout Europe, accelerating, these are the kind of words they use, when actually in a lot of parts of Europe, youth work is still very precariously poised in terms of resources, and sometimes it's even slipping back. My old youth centre in the English Midlands in Birmingham once had more youth centres in one of 12 districts of Birmingham than there are now in the whole of Birmingham. And that shows how, in some parts of Europe, youth work is in a bad decline, despite all of this stuff that I've talked about. There we are, we'll have a discussion, okay? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, both, for very insightful presentations. We have limited time for questions. I will leave my own questions until later, not to abuse the position of the moderator. I will just keep to getting the questions and organizing this Q&A session. So, any questions to any of the presenters, please?
Is that a good sign or a bad sign?
There is a question in the back.
I have a question for the last one. Do we actually need a definition and separate policy for young people? Because we have different activities or different programs aiming different parts of social life, like social support, education, culture, health, etc. And young people are there. So what actually would be the added value of creating a youth policy? In Poland also, we don't have a youth policy actually. Now there are some works about this. I know that there's a coalition for youth work. Actually, it is a movement of NGOs and some local authorities to create something about that. And there is a unit in the Ministry of Education dealing with this. So there are steps to create some youth policy. But I remember I acted with something like this for regional governments 15 years ago, and we added the parts of youth strategies within regional strategy. But the main question is, so what and what for? Because we are talking about this, and you presented that the issue is on the table for years, and maybe this is maybe that's it. So let's discuss, let's point at this, but we don't need actually separate youth policy. What do you think about this?
Have I got another 50 minutes? It's a brilliant question. So what particularly is a critical question. I once said, rather in passing, that all countries have a youth policy by intent, default or neglect. And the important thing is that you're doing something with intent. You know why you're doing it. The second thing is that you have to make sure that there is proper coordination between different parts of policy. So things like removing social security entitlement, if it's not squared with criminal justice policy or youth justice policy, it can propel a lot of young people back into criminality very quickly. So you've got to look at the relationship between different bits of policy. But the third thing is a different thing, is that I don't care whether the money, the resources, come through housing or criminal justice. And no kid has ever stopped in their tracks and said to me, before I join in this program, I want to know which funding stream pays for it. They don't care. They want the experience. And the final thing I would want to say is that, and this was the Welsh Youth Strategy from the year 2000. I wrote most of it, so, you know, and it comes from my practice. It comes from what I've always believed about disadvantage and inequality, is that we've got to give positive opportunities and experiences to young people. And sometimes with a bit of compulsion. So that's a dodgy sort of issue in democratic societies. Give young people choice. Well, I'll tell you, if you give most of the kids I work with choice, they won't do it. They're not interested. I kick them up the backside and say, give it one try. A bit of rock climbing, a bit of, you know, going into the hills, or playing the guitar, or doesn't matter what it is. Try tennis, you know. Oh, that's for Ponzi kids, you know. Try chess, you know. Just try something. And I think this is quite an important thing to think about. There was a time, and I could have done it today, I could have said to all of you, sit down for 5 minutes on your own and just marshal your thinking about why you're all sitting here today as interested people in this topic with your particular professional backgrounds, and you're not doing 10 years in a Polish prison. What has led you to be sitting here today? Yes, self-motivation, but parental support, schooling, and lots of other things as well. Youth organisations, sports clubs, music opportunities, and so on. European exchanges. And then when we look at our most disadvantaged young people and we look at what they've had in that package, they've had nothing. And I once wrote, and forgive my vernacular and bad language, I suppose, but I once wrote that if we do not extend that entitlement, it's not about children's rights, and put that to one side. It's that entitlement to a diverse range of opportunities and experiences. Let us not be surprised that those young people, particularly young men, will be violent, homophobic, racist, xenophobic little bastards in the areas that they live.
This is about leveling inequalities, actually. It's not about youth, it's not about children, it is about leveling inequalities, and there are programs aiming at this.
Yeah, so sure, but it's not enough. I mean, the point is, if you listen to the European Commission bureaucrats, they will talk about 40% of Erasmus Plus is participated in by young people with fewer opportunities. What the hell does that mean? Young people with fewer opportunities. I think most of us in this room could write a fairly good script about what disadvantage might mean in your communities, in your cities, in your countryside, and so on. They're not the kids who are being reached by Erasmus Plus,
Yeah, of course.
most of the time.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Wait a second, Jan.
Thank you very. No, it was not. Thank you very much for both of your presentations, very interesting ones. And I have a question for Professor Alastair, if I may. I would like to return to the very end of your presentation and the question which was there. You posed a question, actually, I would dare to ask you to answer it because it was a very interesting one. Or maybe, in other words, if you can tell us a little bit more how you do look into the future in more optimistic way or not so much. It was a question about the platform of engagements. I hope you remember. Thank you.
Well, if I understood it right, it's well, I was kind of discussing these opportunities and risks, and I was also clearly positioning of myself that I'm the, well, in general, I'm the person who has a full class, half full class, and regarding the social media, I'm very optimistic. Well, there are a lot of studies showing a lot of benefits, what I was not discussing about today. For example, for the different vulnerable groups, it has been a lifesaver, and like the forums in social, in online, etc. But yeah, so the question was that what is the future? The future, well, we can, the future, now of course there are a little bit, there are some new things. I'm not so well informed yet, and I haven't studied. There was like little bits in my presentations, but how AI will influence also this online environment. That I'm not expert to say anything, but other than that, I think that there are a lot of good opportunities, and also young people are pretty clever themselves. They are learning, but we could do much more to support like this fruitful way of using social media and teach how to do it correctly, how to avoid risks, how to well, no, this is what is digital citizenship about in education system means. I'm not very sure if I answered to your question still after this expressing my thoughts, but the question was plus positive or negative. So positive, but still we could do much more.
Thank you. There are two more questions.
Thank you. I also have a question for Professor Alaste. Thank you for your interesting presentation in which you kind of painted a landscape of civic engagement in which social media play an important, or even I would risk to say essential, crucial role. Having that in mind, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the popularity of introducing social media bans for younger teenagers across Europe? And what impact could it play in the youth civic engagement?
Well, it's actually, as many youth researchers all over the world, well, I don't know if absolutely everybody, but I think that there have been protest letters of youth researchers from many places, and I'm the one of them. I think that the banning wouldn't be the solution. It's actually it can open the gate to worse things, and that aligns with my little bit with my presentation and my ideas. The question is not to use or not to use, and we even if we want the kids not to use, we wouldn't succeed. But the question is how to use. So where we are making this distinction, it's actually that we should make the biggest efforts in several possible ways to assure that the negative effects would be, let's say, minimized at least. But of course, this is a very, very, very complicated issue. It's actually, maybe Estonia is even a little bit different on that, but it's, well, no, I would say that banning something is a very easy solution. But well, if I say that that education is good, well, this is also a little bit slogan. Yeah, I can understand that, and it is kind of well, yeah. There are also parents that should be much more acknowledged of all of these issues and all these things. But well, the short answer is that I'm against banning, and I think there is other ways how to deal with that, and the distinction is how to use all these possibilities in a safe and fruitful ways.
Thank you. We have a question here.
Okay, I probably don't need it. So maybe before I ask the question, I would like to say something before, because I'm very close to this topic, because I think a lot of years ago I wrote, because it was a lot, but I'm not aware of the fact that it was a lot of years ago, because the time, as you know, goes very quickly. I wrote the thesis, Implication of Globalization, Explications of Youth Identity in Search of the Aims of the 21st Century Education. And I carried on the research among not only students and the youth generation, but also among teachers and authorities. And my question is related to identity. Because identity, I think, is really important in the policy right now. What do we do for the youth policy, and what do we do for youth identity? How European Union and we as representatives of adults, I think, help develop the youth identity in digital world. As I'm not only theoretician but also practitioner, I participated in the project Journalism Citizenship. We wrote a book about it. We write some useful plans for the lessons about the regional cultural identity and so on. Moreover, because we are talking about European Union and plus Erasmus plus projects, and I don't agree with everything what was said here, because I have been taking part in many projects. For example, BIP, Blended Intensive Program, and I encourage a lot of students who are from different backgrounds at the university. And for example, 2 weeks ago, I was in Spain, in Valladolid University, and there were a lot of students from difficult backgrounds with me, and they develop through these projects, excellent projects. It is a new one, maybe not new, very, very brand new, but new. And my question, therefore, I even work and conduct a lecture for students with special educational needs. And because the question was, what do we do also for the youth, to these difficult students? What do we do for them? And I think that we do as a teachers a lot, because we also prepare the future generations of teachers how to work, how to help them to develop. And it is also thanks to the European Union. But Bauman said, known psychologist, that European is not finished history yet. It was a long time ago. But I think, and I agree, that the European Union is not finished history yet. So, and it is not finished history yet. Therefore, my question is, what do we do as a European members and representatives of the older generations for younger generations to develop their identity? I mean, local identity, regional identity, national identity, European identity, and global identity. And why I'm asking also this question, because as we see these different colors, because when we were opening the this part of presentation, the first speaker said that the youth is colorful nowadays. The youth was colorful, and it is colorful nowadays. But nowadays generation, the youth generation, lives in totally different world, in digital world. As we know, Giddens Robertson said that the world is shrinking. It was 20 years ago, but it is still things.
Could we get to the
okay,
question?
and the question is, so what do we? But this is really important. What do we do for it? So if you could answer, I will be very. Yeah, it is the question for you.
I mean, it depends what kinds of young people we are talking about. I mean, that's the first thing. And then we're talking about young people, then local identities are pretty important. And, you know, as they get older, the other levels of identity that you're talking about, you know, kick in at some point. And I remember when we were going through the Brexit debate, and I was working with young people, you know, talking about Europe, and they'd absorbed all this stuff about all the laws are made in Brussels, and you know, we pay a ridiculous amount of money to the European Union, and they were absolutely hostile to Europe. And then I would talk to them about the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I mean, I didn't talk about it like that, but, you know, I'd talk about, regardless of what they actually think about the globe or Europe, those levels have significant impacts on their lives, and usually positive impacts, not always. I mean, in terms of globalization, there is a question about whether local business, local employment has been jeopardized. And it hasn't been jeopardized for people like me, but it's been jeopardized for lower levels in the labor market, which is why there's such hostility to the other levels. I would say that there's been an evolution around this question of identity. Starting in 1997, the European Union had a project called the DG22 Citizenship Study. And it was talking about citizenship with a European dimension. You weren't allowed to use the expression European citizenship. It was forbidden. And it was whether participation in whatever it was at the time, Youth for Europe 2, Comenius, all those, Leonardo, being part of any of those kinds of programs strengthened your sense of being European. And actually it made very little difference. Often they didn't even know they were being funded through those programs, EU programs. So there's an educational practice that's very important about, you know, the interconnectedness of the modern world. The world may have shrunk in some ways, and you know, according to some of the commentators, that's kind of debatable. The world looks incredibly distant for a lot of people living local lives, but they're not the young people we tend to talk about. So I work with a lot of people whose identity is wrapped up in you know, drug dealing and crime and so on. So it's all about masks and caps and electric motorbikes and those sorts of things. And all their Facebook images are of them like that, holding plastic Kalashnikovs. That's their identity. So we've got to be very careful about, you know, what kind of identities are we referring to? You've mentioned the 5 levels, but inside each of those levels are a whole set of calibrated possibilities for young people. And, you know, and then of course ethnicity and gender and disability kick in and permeate that in another way. So, and you mentioned young people with special educational needs. I actually think, and I'll finish with this remark, it probably doesn't answer your question at all, but I think one of the most important things we need to do in modern Europe is to bring together young people from different backgrounds. I think whether you do that in schools or you do that in non-formal education, there are ways of doing it in formal education as well, but I think non-formal education is the space where it could be done. And I didn't cover it in my talk because I ran out of time, but you know, the latest mantras are the Commission are talking about mainstreaming youth in everything it does. And the Council of Europe are talking about embedding a youth perspective in everything it does. So we have a chance to make good arguments for young people within the European institutions, which should strengthen European identity and hopefully will also strengthen local identity. I mean, the classic stuff in the last 20 years has been local and European and less national identity. I don't know whether that applies to Poland, but it certainly applies to the United Kingdom. Remember, I live in a disunited kingdom where 3 of the governments outside of England are nationalist governments now, independence parties. So there's a very strong Welsh identity where I live, which would never get spoken about, even amongst people who do not speak Welsh and were not born in Wales, because of the way Plaid Cymru, the Nationalist Party, have promoted themselves for everybody who lives in Wales, and we've been sold down the river by London. So there's lots of hostility to London and to England. I mean, they'd probably much rather learn from you here in Poland than they'd learn from anything English. But you probably don't even know that sort of stuff. So I think, you know, the identity questions are, you know, our colleague Jim Cote edits the journal Identity, Social Identity, and there's a lot of theoretical stuff written about it, but quite what that means in terms of looking in the mirror about who am I in the modern complex world, I think is very, very nuanced and complex, I would say. But you'd probably say, well, that's a very wriggle-out answer, but best I can do.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your very inspiring talks. And I would like to connect maybe conclusions for both of them, because Howard really stressed the aspect of reaching to young people. And I would like to ask if actually social media can play this role. Are they actually fulfilling this role of reach, of allowing more people into the discussion, or there is still this inequality being reproduced within social media? Thank you.
Well, Well, social media is definitely reached. There is already a lot of youth working online. I think most of the people know it, so it is kind of doable. Actually, but I'm here giving my point of view, which is like a little bit from the different angle. So my idea have been that to increase, let's say, this kind of traditional political participation, well, we first should start to recognize what young people are doing themselves already, and in occasions of positive activities, support them. So it's well, no, there are also some examples from Estonia well, this Erasmus unit in Estonia, they were reaching out yeah, national agency. Sorry, I didn't remember the right term. They were reaching out to the Fridays for Future and offered their support. So this is something. And in social media, of course, there are a lot of things what people are doing. Well, not everything should be supported, but there are definitely this kind of very positive, this kind of, let's say, democratic acts. So I was a little bit opening it from this angle, but yeah, well, youth work in online youth work has been going on already for a while, and well, in Estonia they have been doing it more and more, and there is also well this saying that youth work has to go where the young people are, and there used to be like a street youth work, and this is still needed. But youth workers go to the street, but the youth workers also go to the social media, and then there is well, I think that it's like two ways beneficial than a benefit. Like youth workers maybe understand better the young people, and there can be contact, and also in case of some kind of risks or dangers, the young people can be more easily helped. Is it answer to your question? More.
I mean, I think it's a dual answer, really, Eva. I think Alina's absolutely right that online youth work has. I mean, most people here probably don't realise it. The first sort of mention of online youth work was 2012. Yeah, in Finland, in Verke was a sort of pioneering online youth work, and there were many people who were completely sceptical about this. You can't do youth work online, you know. It's all about physical connection and so on. And there was a lot of debate, and there were all the sort of technocrats on the one hand, and then the sort of old-fashioned youth workers on the other hand, and never would they meet. And then COVID happened, and suddenly, what a godsend online youth work was. You know, having developed some understanding of it in the previous 8 years, suddenly it was the only way you could do it, or at least it was the only way you could connect with those young people. I mean, this has got, you know, I'm in a university right now, sociology department, and I guess many of you maybe are sort of more academic-y people, and when COVID lockdown was announced in March 2020, most of my academic colleagues started doing surveys of young people. Survey after, what's it like living under COVID? The last thing most of the young people I knew wanted was to do more stuff on screens, because that's all they were being allowed to do in school and everything else. And I wrote to my chief executive of my municipality and said, I'm a nationally qualified youth worker, I've been police checked, I'm ready to go. I also had a motorbike, and I was quite keen not to let it rot in the garage, and I wanted to ride my bike freely in the municipality without getting arrested by the police. So that was a selfish reason. But I could deliver prescriptions for old people. And I became a COVID-19 community resilience support worker for 2 years, the longest title I've ever had. And then I got a letter from the chief executive 2 years later. Thank you very much for all the help you provided during COVID. But I supported loads of young people. And when you're a grey-haired, oldish guy, turning up on a motorbike outside somebody's house, knocking on the door, stepping back in the street, carrying a crash helmet, and you don't know who's going to answer the door. You probably know it's a boy or a girl, and you know they're 16 or 17. They've been in the care system, and they see me, and now you've got to build a link. You've got to try and make a contact. And then the question always was, nice to have met you. Would you prefer to stay in touch online, or do you want me to come back and park my bike in the street and stand and talk to you socially distanced? They always wanted me to come back because they said, you're the only person I'm actually speaking to. Everything else was online. So I think the online opportunities are fantastic for involving rural youth in a whole range of things that they wouldn't have had access to before. But I think we've got layers of the youth population, the demographic, and there's groups of young people who are still completely cut off from the kind of world that Alina's been talking about. And I mean, my facetious remark, and I'll finish with this, is that when I'm a football coach and I coach sort of teenagers in my locality, and when I talk to them about climate change, they've never heard of Greta Thunberg. They've never heard of Fridays for Future, and they're only interested in the weather in terms of will it rain on Saturday. So that's just a salutary reality check.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm sure there are more questions, but of course this is only the start of the day, so I guess there will be plenty of informal opportunities. I have my own questions scribbled down here. And yes, thanks a lot for your great presentations, great answers. Thank you for the very good questions. And yes, let's have a break now. And a big applause for our speakers.
Professor Alastair, Professor Williamson, thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. Really inspiring. We are truly honored by your presence here and deeply grateful for your knowledge, experience and perspective. I would also like to warmly thank Rafał for chairing and moderating the session. Szanowni Państwo, teraz tak, przerwa kawowa należy nam się, zwłaszcza, że jeszcze przed nami trochę pracy. O godzinie 12:30 rozpocznie się czas sesji równoległych. Pierwsza sesja tematyczna, zatytułowana Młodzież wobec wartości i przemian społecznych, odbędzie się dokładnie w tej sali. Osoby dysponujące prezentacjami proszone są o przeniesienie tych prezentacji na pendrive'ie do panów realizatorów tutaj naszej UNIWIZJI, telewizji uniwersyteckiej. Natomiast osoby, które odbywają sesję Młodzież w świecie algorytmów i autentyczności w sali 106, Instytut Socjologii, to jest też mniej więcej w tym kampusie, tylko troszeczkę w innym miejscu, proszone są o zbiórkę o godzinie 12:20, tutaj proszę Państwa przy tych drzwiach, i jako przewodnik pani doktor Wioleta Bryniewicz poprowadzi Państwa do tej sali. No i to ile na razie. Spotykamy się zatem 12:30. Do zobaczenia.